This is Standard Office Procedures, the podcast that helps professionals live and grow through culture, communication, and candor.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Standard Office Procedures podcast. I'm your host, Grace, and with me as always is my love and my light, Shannon. Say hi, Shannon.
Hi.
I think I've called you that before.
I was listening to a recording the other day and it was like, my love, my life.
That's probably it.
Shannon.
I'm starting to get repetitive. That's how you know we have a lot of episodes out. So today we're talking about a topic that I'm kind of interested to see how this goes today. I feel like that Michael Scott quote where he's like, sometimes I start a sentence and I just hope that I catch up to it by the end.
I think that's accurate.
Yeah. So today we're talking about social awkwardness at work, and really kind of how to, if you're somebody who you feel like, God, socializing in general makes me kind of stressed, but especially at work because I'm in this, this environment where I don't really know these people that well. It just feels kind of awkward when I'm trying to interact. Maybe they're awkward. Maybe you feel awkward. We're just going to kind of talk about how to minimize this awkwardness and also talk about just what it means and how it can affect you.
This will be interesting.
Does this sound like fun to you, Shannon?
It sounds a little awkward.
It does. It's very meta, right? It'll be kind of awkward to talk about awkwardness. I think it's kind of like when someone talks about breathing. Now you're very conscious of your breathing. Now I'm going to be very conscious of like, I hope that's not awkward.
Well, I think social awkwardness and confidence could possibly go hand in hand because I think, I feel like there's probably two different kinds of social awkwardness. Maybe we'll talk about that, but maybe there's social awkwardness where you're like just feeling kind of weird. Like you don't feel like yourself. You're not really sure what to do or what to expect. And so then you end up acting kind of weird.
To kind of like compensate.
Yeah, to compensate. Yeah. But then there's social awkwardness like neurodiversity, which maybe that's a whole separate topic. And I don't know if we're talking about
we're really not going to talk about neurodiversity right now because first of all, we aren't really qualified.
I was going to say, can we please not talk about that? I would. Grace almost fell off her chair.
Fell off my chair. I got so excited to talk about it.
She's so socially awkward.
I am. But no, we're not going to talk about neurodiversity just because, A, we're unqualified, and B, I just think that's different. And to me, trying to speak about social awkwardness from the lens of like, for us, we're neurotypical people, and this is geared at neurotypical people. And what I don't want to do is if you are neurodivergent, I don't want you to hear us and hear us saying like, just don't be, right? Like, just be different. Just be not socially awkward.
Yeah, I don't think that's for us, and I don't think we should talk about that.
Absolutely not.
So I wanted to hit on that.
Yeah, I'm glad that you got ahead of that because that is one thing that I want to sort of say at the beginning, which is that, this is going to be geared more towards neurotypical people who are like, I don't have any kind of neurodivergence here. I just
why
feel
am
like
I
socially
so
awkward.
Weird sometimes?
Yeah. And we'll talk about specific instances or maybe like if that is just kind of how your personality.
Sure.
So we're going to touch on that a little bit, but I'm glad that you brought that up. So let's talk about what social awkwardness is, right? Like in a nutshell, it's basically this feeling or this fear that people will think that you lack social skills or aren't like up to their social etiquette standards. It's kind of like if you're a little weird, right? Like if you're like, I feel a little bit weird or people think you're a little bit weird, it's that social awkwardness piece that I think everyone's either experienced in themselves or someone else. I would imagine I just can't think of a single person who's like, I've never had an awkward moment in my life.
Come on.
Yeah, we've all had moments where either we made a faux pas or we did something that was kind of awkward or we said something that you realized too late. You're like, that was weird.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like trying to, like I have a certain sense of humor and it lands really well with Grace.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes I'll try it on somebody else and it's just crickets or like, what are you talking about?
If I go from a meeting with you where we're giggling to a meeting with Owen, where like Owen has a good sense of humor, but like it's not the same. And I'll say something that I'm like, Shannon, that would have killed with Shannon. But Owen's like, I don't get it. And I'm like, yeah, whatever.
Never mind.
And then I feel awkward and I'm like, you should feel awkward. You didn't understand how hilarious I was. But I think it's important to know that the most well-adjusted and like healthy quote unquote person in the world experiences social awkwardness, right? You can be the most confident, outgoing person in the whole world. And we'll kind of talk about how confidence, even if you do have a socially awkward moment, can kind of mitigate it. But just again, blanket statement. We've all done things. Everyone's experienced this before. I don't care who you are. I'm sure you've been socially awkward before.
Absolutely. I think a lot of it stems from like what's within your control and what's not within your control. So like you can go in and you can not be an awkward person, not be feeling awkward or whatever, but the way somebody acts or responds to you or doesn't respond to you can turn that into awkwardness really quickly, whether you contributed to that or not.
Or like if the environment that you're in, right?
Yeah.
Like if you, I think of myself as a relatively confident, like not super, like a relatively socially adept human being. But if I'm dropped into a place where I'm like, oh, this is not my wheelhouse. Like, I really like typically nerdy stuff, I guess. But I went to a Comic-Con once and I I was so awkward.
Yeah.
Because like they all had the same in jokes and they all kind of knew each other. Like I say they, like everybody else at this con. And I felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb because I wasn't in costume and I was just like, I just did not fit in. And I spent like the entire day feeling like I'm awkward, I'm weird, I'm making it weird. And
Which
I was
is like the best place to be weird.
I was like this bunch of nerds. Like how am I feeling weird and awkward? But like that's such an indicator of like, it doesn't really matter. It's not about how, sometimes it's not about how socially adept you may be. It's about your environment, right? Or like the things that you wear sometimes. Like there's all kinds of factors that if you feel othered in some capacity, it may make you feel awkward.
Absolutely.
So kind of touching on that, it's social awkwardness also often occurs when you're in a new situation and environment. So from that lens, we're talking about like if you're starting a new job, right? So from a professional standpoint, it doesn't really matter how familiar and comfortable you are with socializing. If you're in a new environment like that, we all have those first day jitters, no matter how old we get and no matter like how skilled and adept we are. There's always that sense of like anxiety on your first day where you feel a little bit awkward. You don't know what the protocol is. You're like, do we eat lunch now? Do we talk? Is that allowed? Can I interrupt you? You're trying to figure out what the workflow.
For me, it's always like, what's the level of humor?
What's the level of humor? How inappropriate can we get? Like, I'm not saying that to be funny. I feel like it's genuinely a thing where it's like, if you have kind of like I have, not on the podcast, I keep it clean here, but like a relatively kind of like raunchy sense of humor. And you've got to really be careful.
I know your crowd.
I have said things before that I'm like, oh, this is funny. And I'll say it as a joke. And let me tell you, it did not go well. Yeah. So again, like there's a lot of like reading the room and learning and cue kind of figuring out that you have to do on if you're new somewhere. So that can create socially awkwardness.
I think there's also being new somewhere, like maybe you've worked at your place of work for a while, but you're entering into a space that you don't spend a lot of time in. So say I'm perfectly comfortable in my department, in the marketing department, but if I walk over into the IT department or I'll walk into the warehouse, like that's not my domain. And all of a sudden I turn into an awkward human being and I try to be cool. I'm not cool. Like
I think you're cool.
I'm not cool.
But no, I feel what you're saying. And we'll touch on this later. Well, I'm going to save that for later. It's a little nugget for later about what you just said. But yes, I do think that just kind of any new environment, whether it's a whole new job or like you said, interacting with new people, maybe it's new clients, maybe it's new vendors, that can create this feeling of awkwardness.
Sure.
And then if you're somebody who already kind of feels regularly anxious in social situations, Shannon, sometimes
I'm never anxious.
Like that's you a little bit. This workplace or these workplace events can kind of present a unique challenge. Like you just went on a conference, if you don't mind me saying.
Yeah.
And leading up to that conference, you had a lot of anxiety over like, you didn't know. And I think a lot of that comes from the unknown. It's like, you don't know what to expect. What are these people going to be like? I'm expected to kind of like hobnob with them a little bit, like rub elbows. And you're like, I don't know how this is going to go.
I don't know what to wear. I could not.
That's a big one. Yeah.
I could not I went with my boss, Owen. And like, it's different for dudes. You wear a suit, you look nice. Like, I had no idea what to wear.
For women, it's like, is this a dress thing or a slacks thing?
And it was like kind of a ritzy thing, but like, was it casual? And then I didn't know what to do, and that was causing me such anxiety. And it was like an unreasonable amount of anxiety.
Right.
Once I got there, it was fine.
Right. But because But that lead up where you're like, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And it's in like things like dressing. That's a social cue to other people, right? And you want to make sure that you are giving the correct, like the appropriate social cues because you don't want to be too dressed up. You don't want to be too dressed down because we do make snap decisions about people based on what they're wearing, what they look like.
And I think a lot of times like what you're wearing, if it's not and so this was something that, I found in this is that like, I don't dress up very much. Like we're very casual at the office. Yep. I'm usually pretty casual. I mean, every now and then I'll dress up. I'm probably still going to wear jeans. Like, but I had to really dress up, and I haven't dressed up for an event like this in years. I mean, pandemic, like hello. And I felt so awkward, and it took me a long time to like feel comfortable in my own skin. And if you don't feel comfortable in your own skin, you're going to feel awkward or come off as awkward. Which
is just kind of a great kind of side tip to give, which is like dress to impress is a thing that we've all heard, right? Which is true. I think that's very true. I think that's great. But if you are dressing to impress and it's something that's kind of outside your normal wheelhouse, like you were describing, make sure that you get something that you feel comfortable in.
Yeah,
absolutely. This is my thing is like, I want to wear like a professional dress, but I don't feel comfortable when things are really tight on my stomach.
Right.
So like I avoid dresses that are tight on my stomach or on my thighs or whatever, because I'm like, look, if I get this, I know I'm going to be tugging at it all day.
Yeah.
And that is kind of like a quote unquote socially awkward thing to do. If you're constantly fidgeting.
You're uncomfortable.
Yeah. And people will be able to look at that and see it. And they might not say, oh, she's fidgeting, she's awkward. But they'll be like, something about her is kind of stressing me out. Like she has a nervous energy.
You feel like you have to suck in or your shoes aren't comfortable. I think it's a really good idea if you're going to something like this if you can get your clothes ahead of time and wear them at
100%.
least once and wash them at least once before you're going on your event, even if it's not stuff you would normally wear, like just do it once or twice. Because if it's something you've worn before versus something that's brand new, like, you know how sometimes you get pants. I mean, I'm speaking particularly to women. Like, you know, sometimes you get pants and like they stretch out within like an hour, you know, or like, oh my gosh, they show like water droplets like insane,
or they wrinkle really
quickly, you know, and just it's really helpful if you can wear them ahead of time so you kind of know what to expect. Because like, man, that's just a whole added level. Like, what if you go and you're feeling good and an hour later your pants are freaking falling down? Like, this is a thing that happens. It happens. No, jeans are the worst about that. Don't be tearing tags the day of. Do that stuff jeans
before.
Stretch, which stretch is great.
Stretch is great as long as it goes
know your
back.
Stretch.
Know your stretch. So again, if you are somebody who's really kind of anxious about feeling awkward, chances are probably pretty good that you're going to avoid with interacting with people, or like kind of keeping yourself out of new situations, which is understandable, but that can adversely impact your goals in your career, right? Like if you're somebody who you have these goals where you're like, I want to get ahead by, you know, whatever, we don't have to put like by when, but you like, I want to get ahead. I know I want to do this. I know I want to progress. You're going to have to do some interacting with other people. And oftentimes we're the only things holding ourselves back, right? Either with self-doubt or with this like anxiety related to, I don't want to, you know, step into this, you know, new environment, or I don't want to put myself out there because what if I mess it up? There's this fear of like, it's better to not do it than to mess it up. I'm so familiar with that fear in all kinds of different contexts. But I think oftentimes with socializing, we do it more often and we don't realize that socializing and just kind of talking to people and relating to others is, like so many other things, a soft skill.
Absolutely.
That maybe, you know, maybe you are a little bit awkward right now. Maybe you're younger or you're greener, or maybe you're just kind of like, you're in a new environment or a new
in over
field.
Your head.
All kinds of reasons. And if that's the case, just know that like, you're not alone, first of all. And second of all, this is a very workable thing.
Totally.
With practice, you'll get more comfortable. It's that unknown factor like Shannon was describing a moment ago. What makes us anxious is not knowing what's going to happen. The more you do something, the more you remove that sort of mystery. The more you get
desensitize that awkward feeling by pushing yourself to do it over and over again.
And you start to know, you know, I think I know how this is going to go, right? And you're going to get it wrong sometimes. You know, if you're like, if I speak up in this crowd, I know it's probably going to get this reception. You might be wrong, but that's just more information. So it's worth it. It's worth it.
You know, it's interesting. You brought up that conference that I just went to. So it was a conference where it was a lot of CEOs and a lot of, you know, company leaders. And I just...
Shannon, you bad Melvin, can you bleep that? Sorry. Go ahead.
So, you know, I had kind of talked to a few different people, and they ask you to like what you do and where you're from, and ask you about your company. What does your company do? And what's your role there? And after a few times of saying, I felt pretty good about it. You know, I felt like I could have this conversation. You're networking and people come up and talk to you. And like 9 out of 10 times it was great. And then there was always that one person that you talk to that's like, it just doesn't land, or they're not interested, or they're not just not reading you right, or they almost seem a little like skeptical about what you're saying. And that can make you feel so weird. And I definitely had a few instances of that, which like most of the time it was fine because I had gotten used to it. That doesn't mean there's not still going to be that like surprise instance from somebody.
Exactly.
And that can like, I don't know, that social awkwardness can just come out of nowhere.
Yeah. And that can kind of derail you, right? If you're like, I'm doing pretty great. I'm really kind of gliding along here and connecting and doing a good job socializing. And then one person makes you feel weird. And then you're like, am I weird? And then it can kind of like domino effect.
It's like, and you get these messages in your head, right? So that can start carrying over into conversations you have after that. There's a cartoon. Gosh, I wish I knew the artist's name. Ooh, I can't think of it. Anyway, there's this cartoon, but this female cartoonist that I love. I've got to remember her name and we can put it in the show notes. But it's this woman, she's sitting and there's all these little speech bubbles all around her, just clouding the whole square around her. And it's all like, nice, good job, good work, nice, good job. And there's one little one that's like, could use improvement. And she's like, well, I'm ruined.
I guess I failed.
That's the only thing I see, you know? And it's like, that's what you carry with you. So anyway, I say all that to say it happens to everybody, and it can be so easy to fixate on those little things.
It does. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a moment, but remember that people aren't thinking about you as much as you are thinking about you.
I tell my daughter that all the time.
And it's
I'm like,
very
nobody
true.
cares.
And like I said, we're going to expand on that, but if you make a social gaffe, or maybe like, again, maybe you don't do anything wrong, but a conversation just goes weird and you're like, that was weird. I was so weird. Why did I say that? Or like, why were they reacting like that? Or why are they looking at me like that? They're probably not thinking about it. And if they are thinking about it, they kind of suck. So I'm just saying, if there's people out there, and there are people out there, unfortunately, who put others down to make themselves feel better. And I'm sure that a lot of us can relate to this, but like I've had interactions where like I'm being normal and somebody will be like, why are you doing that? You're so weird. And I'm like, what? And then especially as a kid, you're like, oh my God, I'm weird, right? You internalize that. As an adult though, I've been able to identify like, you're not a nice person. Like if you're trying to make me feel small and I'm not doing anything at all. So, you can kind of, as you get more experience with this, you'll be able to differentiate a little bit better.
Yeah, I tell my daughter this all the time when she's she's getting to that preteen age. She's really worried about everybody else and what they think about her. And I've tried to tell her, like, people are not nearly as concerned with you as you think they are. They are so worried about themselves. Because what are you worried about? You're worried about yourself.
Yeah.
And then there will be some people that will seem like they're worried about what you're doing and they're thinking about it and they're remembering it. And that has everything to do with them and nothing to do with you.
Exactly.
So it's still not you.
And that persists into adulthood. Some people are just trash. All right. So let's talk about like some examples of social awkwardness.
Trash.
A little trash. I feel like we've described it at length. So some kind of social awkwardness examples can include things like misspeaking, when you just, we've all done that. We say the wrong word. Calling somebody by the wrong name. That's kind of a biggie. But again, it happens, right? Yeah. You hope that you get somebody graceful on the other end who's like, oh no, my name is actually Grace. I'm not going to be mad at you for it. Yeah. You keep doing it. Maybe stop. Maybe learn people's names. Making a mistake, I guess, could be considered social awkwardness. To me, that seems like a different thing. But
I guess it depends on the mistake. I feel like that would fall more in the line of like misspeaking or making a mistake like, oh my God, I just dropped my coffee.
Yeah, like a faux pas, right? Yeah. Like something like that. Not feeling comfortable in your clothing. Kind of, we talked about that. That's a big one. Feeling out of touch with current trends. I can see that leading to some awkwardness.
I could see that leading to awkwardness, especially like you said, if it's a new group or a new office that you're in where maybe people dress differently or you're starting something new and you're like, oh no, I don't even know what's cool anymore.
Yeah, you're trying to figure out.
I felt like that. I went to a big marketing conference a couple years ago and I was like, oh no, like I'm just a mom. I'm not cool. I live in Alabama. I don't know what to wear.
Mom.
And like that was silly. I got there and of course I was wearing completely normal clothes, but I that can feel very odd, especially as you're like aging. Like,
what's important there is that you just told yourself a bunch of messages, right? Yeah. Where like, I'm a mom, I'm from Alabama, I'm not cool. Like all those things can be reframed very easily as positives.
Yeah. I'm cool.
You are cool.
I'm a cool mom
and you're a very
Alabama.
hot mom. And Alabama's a very trendy place to live, guys. Listen, we could talk about that. Huntsville specifically. Alabama's trying, well, some parts of it are. Anyway, so I do feel like it's about this messaging that you tell yourself can really impact kind of how you exist in the world. So another example is being much older or much younger than the rest of your team, which kind of goes hand in hand, with the being out of touch with friends. Being asked personal questions, that can be super awkward. Yes. Or asking hyper personal questions.
Like accidentally asking something that's too personal. Yep. That can be really tough when you're trying to feel out a new crowd. Because some people are totally fine with it. Some people are not.
They have very clear boundaries.
And I think that's where we get those like blanket statements that's like, don't have friends at work, don't have personal conversations at work.
Because it's just quote unquote easier.
Because it's like throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're not even going to touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Right. Which again, like you can read the room of your workplace, but I disagree. I think we've both said before, Shannon, that we disagree with that. I think that there's a way to like, have healthy relationships at work and make friendships at work. But also have healthy boundaries. If you don't want to talk about stuff at work, you don't have to, right? Yeah. Somebody makes you feel awkward. And if somebody asks you something that's like very personal
and you
decline to answer and then they make you feel weird, again, they suck. Yeah, that's not nice. I also love, this is on our list for the notes for this episode, is having a crush on a coworker can be awkward.
That can be very awkward.
Cute. Like I think about children at school. But if you're adults though, I think about what's the Love Actually, where she's obsessed with that guy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, hey girl, maybe curb it.
But I can't see how, like if you have a crush on a coworker, that can cause you to start acting awkwardly because you're, again, uncomfortable in your skin, not sure how to act, you get nervous, and so you're not just being yourself. Like, just not do it. Just don't have a crush on a coworker.
Yeah, how about you just don't have a crush on your coworker?
Don't be socially awkward at all.
Yeah, just fix it.
The Standard Office Procedures podcast is presented by Blue Summit Supplies. We're an online office supply store that puts you at the forefront of our focus by offering new career-building resources every single week. Sign up for our newsletter and visit our blog at bluesummitsupplies.com for free downloads, tools, and tips to make your job easier and more fun.
All right, so let's talk about what you guys have all been waiting for. How to be less socially awkward at work.
Just don't do it.
Yeah, just stop being socially awkward. Be good at people. Also, some other actual tips are treat yourself with compassion. Number one, important. This is the big one. This is the only one that I really want you to listen to, is to remember that everybody messes up. And okay, maybe you did something that was a little bit awkward, a little bit weird, or people didn't get the joke or whatever it is. guess what? It's over now.
Yeah.
And nobody else is thinking of it. And again, if you work in a group of people who are mature and generally kind adults, they're not going to like, they're not going to bring it up all the time. And they're probably, it's going to just kind of fade into obscurity.
If you don't, then screw them. And you need to listen to some of these other podcast episodes about getting a new job.
Yes, highly recommend. If you work with a bunch of bullies, then leave. They don't deserve you. Also remember that we judge ourselves a lot more harshly than other people, like times a billion. I know that. So yesterday I was in class and obviously everything's on Zoom. And so you have to like unmute your mic, and it's always Zoom meetings in general are kind of awkward with a lot of people. And there's like 20 people in my class. So people are always talking over each other and all that stuff. So I had like raised my hand, quote unquote, like you can do on Zoom. And then I lowered it because the moment had kind of passed, which already is an awkward moment, And then my professor was like, Grace, I know you had a comment. And I was like, oh yeah, it's not super relevant anymore. And she was like, no, go ahead. And I was like, well, okay. And so I said what I was going to say from like 5 minutes prior, even though the conversation had moved on. I felt so awkward because I was like, this is not relevant. And at the end of it, I was like, I don't know, that wasn't super intelligent. And I muted my mic again. And the professor like kind of looked at me like pityingly and then was like, okay, and called on someone else. And I was like, I'm going to die. Yeah. I was like, I want to be I was like, I want to turn my camera off and close my laptop and then like disappear into the forest. Like it was so awkward. But here's the thing. Nobody remembers
cares.
That. Like nobody's even thinking about I'm thinking about it.
You're thinking about it.
And I took
your professor's not thinking about it. The other students were thinking about it.
No one remembers that. But I took a shower this morning. So like a full 12 hours afterwards. And I was like, you idiot. Like, what the hell was that, you idiot?
You need to treat yourself with compassion.
So anyway, the point being, that's exactly right. Like I should have been like, and I'm trying to be like, Grace, nobody's thinking about that. Also, that was like, it wasn't that bad. It was
also,
just kind of awkward.
You didn't do anything wrong.
No.
I think that's a very important message to tell yourself, because change the messaging in your head from like, oh my God, I did something bad, to like, you didn't do anything wrong.
I didn't do anything wrong.
You're living life.
Yeah.
You're just
LIVIN.
Also, she prodded you to say
she
the
did.
thing.
Yes. No, that's true.
And even if she hadn't, and even if you had left your hand up and then she called on you and you're like, oh no, that was awkward. That was from 5 minutes ago. You still didn't do anything wrong. Yeah. You're participating in class. You're just living.
Yeah.
It's cool.
And I'm trying to say my piece and I'm trying. Yeah, exactly. So all that being said, like, I don't think anybody in my class is thinking about it at all anymore. And if they are, if there's one person in that class that's like, Grace is so embarrassing, that tells me more about them than me.
Yeah.
Right? Because like Shannon said, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't, it was just me attempting something and it was not the most finessed way. And then we moved right along.
I was actually listening to another podcast yesterday. So it was maintenance phase, which I've talked about before. And there's an episode and they were talking about protein. So this is the episode it's in, the protein episode. But they were talking about heroes that we have. And, you have these heroes and you put these people on a pedestal and then eventually you find out something not so great about them and it can just ruin the whole thing for you. And they were talking about how dangerous it can be to have heroes and instead to look at people just as people, because we all have these faults and and they were talking about how it can actually be a much more interesting way to look at people as like holistic people and not these like perfect heroes up on a pedestal. So I think it's important to do the same thing with yourself and recognize that other people are probably also doing it. You're not like this celebrity hero. You're just you.
Yeah.
And that's not to downplay who you are.
Which is wonderful.
You're a special, beautiful snowflake. Yes. But I do think it's important, like treating yourself with some grace of like, I'm not perfect. I'm not going to be perfect. I'm going to do some weird stuff. And you know what? So is everybody else. And
exactly.
Who cares?
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think that's just kind of like key to all of this. Like none of the other stuff about improving your social skills, et cetera, is going to really work unless you treat yourself with compassion.
Exactly.
So Shannon made a great point. Like I shouldn't have been in the shower being like, you idiot. And next time I hope to be kinder. But now sitting here talking about it, I'm like, yeah. Whatever. Yeah. Like it's water under the bridge. Who cares? And genuinely, I feel like tonight I'm not going to think about it again and it's over. So just remember that. These things are temporary.
That's also a good tip. Have people in your social circle, on your support system that can be like, dude, nobody cares. It's fine.
It's not that big of a deal.
To help you let go of stuff.
Yes. Validation is important.
If you keep it inside and then you're going to have those weird shower conversations with yourself, like have a normal human conversation with another human.
With a human being. Also, it's important to remember that like if you start to internalize this stuff where you're like, I'm a failure, and you just say that to yourself in the shower, then it's more likely that you start to do this stuff over and over again.
Yeah.
Right? Where like if you're just like, well, I guess this is how I am, and you just start to define yourself by your silly mistakes, quote unquote. I hesitate to even say mistake because just like you said, it wasn't really a mistake, but by your like little like faux pas, then you're deciding, you alone are deciding like, this is who I am, this is what I do.
Yeah.
That's not true. That doesn't have to be true. You're
not silly, you're not stupid.
Yeah.
My therapist actually called me out one time. She was like, you've been coming to me for a while, and I have noticed that you use the word silly and stupid to describe your feelings and your actions a lot. And that's not a good way to talk about yourself. You're just living life. Like you're
just
doing
having a
stuff.
feeling.
You being a person is not silly or stupid.
Yes. All right. Another tip is to practice improving your social skills. I like this one. I feel like I practice my social skills with you every day, Shannon.
Hey,
I just socialize them. So like we mentioned before, socializing is a soft skill that you can develop with practice. And remember that socializing and communicating in general starts with your body language, right?
Yeah.
It's not just what you say. It's also how you say it, how you stand, how you, approach people, how you look them in the eye. So if you're somebody who you're like, oh, I'm awkward, and maybe your body language kind of reflects this belief that you have about yourself that you are awkward. First of all, you can change that, right? It's a soft skill. So maybe start by like pushing your shoulders back a little bit, kind of mimicking what you imagine a confident person does, right? So shoulders back, making eye contact with people, smiling, right? You don't have to smile all the time. I always hesitate to say smiling because it's so like women are like, smile all the time.
Smile.
Yeah, exactly. Just smile. You'd be so much prettier if you smiled.
Honestly, I think smiling can be more for you than for somebody else, right?
I agree.
Like, there's something to smiling to be approachable and to express to somebody who, that you're a nice person and you're happy
you're
and
open.
You're open. But I also think, it's one of those things like fake it till you make it. Like if you smile to yourself and like sometimes I'll catch myself smiling to myself and I'm just like, I'm just delighted. I'm like, I'm just smiling.
just having a nice time. Also, it's science that when you smile, it releases like endorphins, right? Like it makes you happier. Like it's not as much as like working out, but it does like kind of send a signal to your brain that says, oh, we're happy. And so and I'm not saying sit there and like grimace if you're sad, like force yourself to smile. That. But I'm just saying like, try smiling on. And also if you make eye contact with people and give them a little smile, and maybe you're somebody who you're like, I do not want to make conversation, right? Like I'm very socially anxious. I don't want to talk. And people don't always want to talk to you, right? Like people have their own stuff to do. And oftentimes when I make eye contact with people and I smile at them, that's it. That's the entire exchange. We just shared a smile. And it's really important to like the human experience. I don't want to get too like weird here, but people want to be acknowledged. Yeah. That's like a core need for every human being is to be acknowledged, and just giving somebody a smile and eye contact kind of checks that box, right?
Yeah. It's so funny you say that, like, and we have a pretty open office and there's some people in the other office and I go, and I don't want to bother them. But if I'm coming in the door and one of them looks over at me, I will smile and say, hey, how's it going? And then walk on, And so it's just a simple matter of like acknowledging somebody. Again, like you said, people want to be acknowledged. What would be worse is if they looked at me and I literally just kept walking, them, which I think some people do, and it's not, and it's a little awkward, and it's okay. Like, it's okay That's if you do that. But, just consider, like, do you feel a little socially awkward?
I will say too, it's a cultural thing. I know that, so in the South, we're pretty chatty, right? Like, and I mean, as a whole, like you go to the grocery store and you're getting your groceries, checked out or whatever. And the cashier's always like, hey, how you doing? How's your day been? And you have like a little exchange.
Oh, what are you making?
Yeah. What are you making? Oh, this looks good. Are you having a party? And I'm always like, nope, all those are for me. But no. And then you go up north. Like I lived for a year in Maine, and I just remember thinking like, oh my God, everyone's so rude here. And they weren't rude. They're just not a chatty culture, right? Like you check out with your groceries and I'd be like, hey, how are you doing? And the grocer would look at me and be like, fine.
Good.
Yeah, like fine. And also, I think that we know in the South, like, hey, how are you doing? And they go, hey, how are you doing? You don't actually answer the question.
You don't actually have to continue the conversation.
No, you just both say, hey, how are you doing? Nobody answers. And then you carry on with your day. So obviously those are kind of like cultural like nuances. But I do want to acknowledge that because if you're somebody who lives in an area where small talk isn't really done, I'm not telling you to go out and like be super weird. I'm just saying, kind of read the temperature of where you're living. Yeah. And like if people are chatty and people do make eye contact and smile, you can reciprocate or you can start it.
I think that's something I forget about a lot, which is normal to forget about when we're talking on the podcast and we talk about working in an office and we talk about doing things a certain way. Like we're doing it from the lens of our office, which is a small office, which is different than the norm here in the South, in a pretty progressive city. And like we're just chatty people in general. We are. Yeah. It's our opinion and our experience. So everybody's threshold of awkwardness is going to be different.
No, everything I say is correct.
Well, for you, yes, it is. Good job.
Thank you very much. All right. So another thing that you can do to improve social awkwardness is to put your focus on other people. So this is like, I don't even want to say it's like my trick because it's not a trick. It's just something I inherently do. But I've had people say before like, oh, you're such a good listener, or I love talking to you. You know why? It's because I ask them questions about themselves.
Yes.
People, me included, I'm not going to act like I'm better than this. People love talking about themselves. And that's not because, like, that's not to say that you're self-absorbed or anything. It's just because we are our most comfortable topic, right? I can speak about myself more confidently than I can just about anything except for maybe Harry Potter. I know probably about as much about Harry Potter. But like if somebody's asking me a bunch of questions about me, I know I can answer those questions and I'm going to come out of there looking like I know what I'm talking about. Versus if somebody asks me a bunch of questions about like I don't know, IT processes, I'm going to feel very unconfident and feel socially awkward. And then it's not a conscious choice that we make, but we like people better who make us feel good about ourselves, right?
Go listen to our episode about making small talk at work, because I think that talks a lot about this, and like the power of asking questions it's incredible. Like I have learned that there's a few people at work like Owen and you that I have learned so much about. I never thought about myself as being super shy. But again, I was very like inwardly focused, and I've learned so much. Just ask people questions and just keep asking probing questions and keep them talking. And you learn a lot, but people also come out liking you too.
Yeah, they like you better. Yeah. It's just, I mean, that's just science.
But when you're sitting and you're focused on something somebody else is saying, you're not thinking about yourself. And when you think about yourself, that's when you start to get awkward.
Right. Yeah. I always feel like my thing is this intrusive thought. Whenever I'm in a situation where I'm like kind of already a little bit nervous, I suddenly in the middle of the conversation, I'll be like, what are you doing with your hands? And then I'm like, no.
Oh, no.
Because I'm like, they were in my lap, but now I feel like they look stupid. Where should I put them?
Now I'm looking at my hands.
I know, right? Now I don't know what to do with my hands. So I feel like we all have, our brain does this stuff to us all the time where it's like, oh, are you doing well? Guess what? Here's a little like, what do you call like a Mario Kart red shell? Just derail you a little bit. So anyway, just trust your instincts. Keep your hands where they are. I'm sure they're fine. But yeah, talking about asking questions, another tip is to remember their answers. And I don't mean like in a like serial killer way where you're like mentally documenting everything, but I do mean that if you are having a good conversation and things are going really well and you're like, wow, this is easy. I'm doing a great job. If you remember their answers, you're like, oh, how was your vacation? Oh, you have kids? I didn't know that. What are your kids' names? Oh my gosh, you guys have a dog? Whatever. And then the next time you talk to them, it won't be awkward because guess what? You got in your back pocket, you go, hey, how are the kids? How's Katie?
Lauren?
Yeah, exactly. How's your puppy? Oh my gosh, he's so big now, whatever. Right? So you're giving yourself material to work off of later. Yes. So you're preventing that weird kind of like, I don't know what to talk to this person about. Yeah. So when you ask them questions, it is important to don't just like, I know sometimes, especially when you're newer to socializing, and I say that doesn't sound like you're like a baby.
If you're newer to socializing, if you're new to people,
to existing on this planet. But if you're newer to kind of practicing these tactics, it can be easy to get caught up. I've done this before.
Oh, sure.
Get caught up and be like, oh, I'm doing a great job. And then you're like, oh, shoot, I'm not listening to them at all.
What did they
say? And so I think that's very normal. So I would make a concerted effort to be an active listener in this context.
And it's okay next time to be like, remind me of your daughter's name. Remind me of your puppy's name. Now, where was it that you went? That's okay. Just don't do that over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Because then it's like they literally
you obviously don't care. Yeah, exactly. And then again, almost as important as being compassionate with yourself is leaning into the awkwardness and laughing at yourself, right? So maybe you do something that is awkward. Like I said, like straight up, it was weird. Or like you did something that was just like made everyone, I don't know, it was weird, whatever. Just laugh at yourself.
Whatever.
People like people who don't take themselves too seriously. Like that's a very endearing quality. On the other hand, people who take themselves very seriously, that's harder to like, right? Generally. So like if you did something kind of weird and awkward and you were like got really like stony and cold and just sort of like shelled up for the rest of the day.
You're just being even more awkward.
Yeah, you're making it weirder. You're making it so much weirder. Yeah. Stop it. But if you just laugh about it and you're like, God, that was weird. You're like, yeah, that was weird. And then you guys can giggle and move on. I do that all the time. I feel like I'm like, that was probably something I shouldn't have said. That was weird.
It makes other people feel more comfortable with you, right? Like people like humble people.
Yeah.
And there's something too, like if you're being a little awkward and you're just like, sorry, that was awkward.
I'm having an off day. Yeah, like or something.
That's totally fine. And then lead up with a question and move on.
Like, just keep the conversation flowing. I do feel like it's also important to say here that if you are somebody who's in a position, if somebody is awkward around you and they try to laugh it off, don't you dare make them feel worse.
No.
I will find you.
Help them
seriously,
move on.
Yeah, that's like, I think that's another reason why people tend to sometimes like me is because like, I feel like I try to be very gracious in social interactions, right? If you mess up a word and they're like, oh, that was weird, I shouldn't have said. I'm like, no, I understand why you did that. Like I try to make them feel better, right? Like, oh no, I would have pronounced it that way too if I'd just seen it from reading, or, oh, I thought it was called that before too, or I've done that before, right? So you try to relate and you try to alleviate their sense of embarrassment by being like, hey, no, I've done that too. You're not alone. Sure. That wasn't that weird or bad. Sure. So if you are on the other end of this, be gracious, be what you would want people to be for you, right? Like if you do something awkward, you'd want them to say, like, take some of the pressure off. You guys can all laugh together. They're not laughing at you. They're like laughing with you. Yeah. That's very key.
I think that's part of that practicing compassion for yourself. When you practice it for other people, I mean, it kind of starts to go hand in hand and you just get more comfortable with those people. Yeah. But it also, like you said, it's a good practice to know, like, when somebody else think about how you feel in that situation. Yeah. If somebody else makes a faux pas or does something kind of awkward, are you worried about it? Because
Yes.
the answer is probably not. And so that's a good reminder for yourself is how you feel when somebody else does it, how you try to make them feel and get them through it. They're probably thinking the same thing about you, and whether they know how to be compassionate towards you or not, like they really don't care.
Yeah. So guys, go be nice to yourselves and be nice to others.
Nice.
Go forth with this messaging. That was very biblical. I'm sorry.
That was awkward.
I didn't mean to get so biblical. That was awkward. And on that note, we love you guys so much. We'll see you in a week.
Bye.
This has been a Blue Summit Supplies production. Good job, Larry.